That night, I worked overtime as usual and went home very late. I had drunk a little too much. When I arrived at the apartment, I pressed the elevator button to go upstairs. My family lived on the 16th floor, and it must have been around 11 or 12 o'clock at night. At that hour, the building was usually very quiet. The elevator first stopped at the negative third floor, before coming up to the ground floor. Feeling hot and sweaty from the alcohol and the walk home, I welcomed the cold air inside the elevator. Without thinking much, I pressed the button for the 16th floor, and the elevator began to ascend slowly. However, it stopped unexpectedly on the 5th floor. I assumed someone was about to get in, so I stepped aside to make room, but when the doors opened, there was no one there. Thinking someone may have pressed the button and decided to take the stairs instead, I pressed the close button to continue my journey. The elevator then stopped again on the 6th floor. Once again, the doors opened to reveal no one. Then it stopped on the 7th floor, and still, there was no one. Frustrated, I stuck my head out of the elevator and yelled, "Who is it? Are you sick?" Stop pressing the elevator and not getting in, but there was no response, nor was there anyone nearby. When the elevator stopped on the 8th floor, I was about to yell again when I noticed a little girl standing in front of the door. She looked to be about 6 or 7 years old. It was odd what kind of child would be wandering around alone at this hour. I waited for her to step inside, but she just stood there, unmoving. I asked, "Little girl, are you getting in? Hurry up. The elevator door is about to close." She didn't respond. Instead, I felt the air inside the elevator grow even colder. Shrugging off my unease, I pressed the close button, but the door opened halfway through as the girl tipped on her toes to press the button again. She looked oddly cute, but I was growing impatient. I asked her again to come inside, but she just stood at the door, silent. Thinking she was playing a prank, I pointed to the elevator's surveillance camera and warned her, "This isn't funny. You're being recorded." Finally, the little girl opened her mouth. Her voice was low and resentful, not at all like a child's voice. She said, "I'm waiting for my mother to come." I looked around, but saw no one else. The uneasy feeling crept up on me again. I decided not to wait any longer and pressed the close button firmly. This time, the girl didn't press it again, and the elevator began rising without further stop. Relieved, I exhaled deeply and just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. But when the elevator reached the 11th floor, the lights inside suddenly began to flicker. I nervously looked up at the lamp and noticed strange stains and spots on it, as if someone had poured a layer of ink over it. What shocked me even more was that the stain was slowly spreading and getting larger, with the flickering lights adding to the unsettling scene. I began to wonder if I had drunk too much and was hallucinating. I struggled to control my fear, thinking only of getting home as long as the elevator kept running normally. Just as I lowered my head, something in the elevator mirror made me shudder. I clearly saw a hand appear behind me. The fear that gripped me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. From that moment, every second in the elevator became a relentless psychological torment. I couldn't stand to stay there any longer. Desperate, I pressed the button for the 14th floor, deciding to climb the stairs the rest of the way. When the elevator doors opened, I quickly lowered my head and prepared to rush to the stairwell, but someone was blocking my path. It was the little girl I had seen earlier on the 8th floor. She seemed to be waiting for me, but how had she gotten there? She hadn't entered the elevator. My heart nearly stopped as I realized the impossibility of the situation. The girl slowly raised her head, revealing a sinister expression. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, almost reaching her ear. I was utterly confused. What was she talking about? There was no one in the elevator, nor anyone else around. Who was this mother she mentioned? My fear reached its peak as my legs began to tremble uncontrollably. I felt like I wouldn't be able to make it home at this rate. Desperately, I bypassed the girl and rushed to the stairwell, climbing the stairs as fast as I could. As I ascended, the sensor lights in the corridor began lighting up one by one. Yet, I hadn't reached those floors, and there was no one else walking ahead of me to trigger them. The impossibility of it all was driving me mad. Finally, I reached the 16th floor. I flung open the staircase door and ran toward my apartment, but what I saw made my blood run cold. At the corner near my door stood a mother and daughter. The little girl was the same one I had just encountered. How did they know where I lived? How did they get here so quickly? I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't go home now. I didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Quietly, I turned around and tried to open the staircase door to escape, but my sweaty hand slipped on the spring-loaded door, causing it to rebound with a loud noise. The sound echoed through the silent corridor, and I wanted to cry. As I feared, the noise alerted the mother and daughter. Their footsteps echoed in the corridor as they came toward me. In sheer panic, I pushed open the emergency exit door again and ran downstairs as fast as I could, nearly tripping several times. I didn't dare to stop and ran all the way to the security room downstairs. The security guard was not there at the moment. He must have gone out on patrol. I steadied my trembling body and looked through the small window in front of me. To my horror, I saw the mother and daughter standing at the door on the first floor. They didn't chase after me, but just stood there glaring at me with a look that seemed like they wanted to kill me. I was so scared that I was about to scream when the security guard suddenly returned. Seeing me trembling all over, he asked in surprise what had happened. I pointed to the front door, but by that time, there was nothing in front of it. The guard then accompanied me upstairs to my apartment. I thought my wife would already be asleep, but she was still waiting for me with the lights on. She told me that someone had rung the doorbell earlier, and she thought I had come home. But just as she was about to open the door, she remembered that I always came home quietly and never rung the doorbell to avoid waking her. Feeling cautious, she didn't open the door immediately. Instead, she checked the doorbell display and saw that no one was outside. However, just as she sat back on the sofa, the doorbell rang again and kept ringing repeatedly. She decided to leave the display on and wait by the door. Finally, she saw a woman's face appear on the screen. The face was pale and terrifying, nothing like a normal person's face. Frightened, she turned on all the lights and called the security room, but there was no answer since the guard was out on patrol. At that moment, I was running downstairs like crazy. When she looked at the display again, the woman had disappeared. Neither of us slept that night. The next morning, I went to the security room and asked the guard to check the elevator's CCTV footage. I thought it would give me some answers, but what I saw only made things worse. In the footage, I saw myself waiting for the elevator on the first floor. I entered it soon after, and everything seemed normal at first, but then something inexplicable happened. It was as if I was under some kind of spell. I rode the elevator from the 5th floor to the 8th floor, pressing all the buttons in between. On the 7th floor, I appeared to scream at empty air. On the 8th floor, I whispered something to no one, closed the door, pointed at the CCTV, and said something incomprehensible. Afterward, I stared at the elevator panel for a while, then suddenly pressed the button for the 14th floor and bolted out of the elevator. Throughout the entire process, the footage showed only me acting bizarrely. No one else was captured. The CCTV at the front door showed me running out of the building, but again, there was no sign of anyone else. The security guard mocked me and my wife, suggesting we were imagining things, but it all felt so real to me. Who were that woman and child?